Good morning, and yes, it is a very good morning indeed. Just think, the sky is bright blue, the sun is shining, and there's a little bonus for you all today. It is a Monday, meaning we have a nice fresh start and a whole productive week ahead of us. Just make sure to work as hard as you can and make sure that every single moment is filled with happiness, then you will definitely achieve great things this week. Oh? You say you're feeling down? Well, that's really interesting actually, because it was only last week when I was listening to a podcast, and basically she was saying that by doing yoga 6 times a week we can reduce our stress levels by up to 82%. She was also talking about diet as well, but we all know how important that one is. It's no wonder that these people who just consume so much junk food are just so down in the dumps all the time. See, it's just so easy to control how we feel, isn't it? What? You still feel down? Oh, just look on the bright side and brush it off. Seriously, you've got so much going for you and you've got so much to be grateful for. There's literally no reason to feel bad. It's good vibes only here, okay? Oh? You say you're feeling down? Well, that's really interesting actually, because it was only last week when I was listening to a podcast, and basically she was saying that by doing yoga 6 times a week we can reduce our stress levels by up to 82%. She was also talking about diet as well, but we all know how important that one is. It's no wonder that these people who just consume so much junk food are just so down in the dumps all the time. See, it's just so easy to control how we feel, isn't it? What? You still feel down? Oh, just look on the bright side and brush it off. Seriously, you've got so much going for you and you've got so much to be grateful for. There's literally no reason to feel bad. It's good vibes only here, okay? Heard enough? Well, I'm guessing the answer is yes, but I'm sure it's not the first time when you've heard somebody talk in this sort of way. Perhaps it's got to the stage now where you're just so used to it that you even end up talking back to yourself inside your mind in that kind of respect. But maybe the people who speak to you like that are just the sort of people who just seem to be happy all of the time. But have you really thrived off this positive self-talk? Or deep down do you know that it hasn't really been of much use? Because chances are, if that is the case, then you're dealing with something called toxic positivity. So in the last couple of months or so, there's definitely been a lot more talk about toxic positivity. However, what actually is it? I personally didn't actually know what it was until maybe a few months ago, and I think that a lot of people probably feel the same. So the definition of toxic positivity, provided by the psychiatry group, so it's like a legit page, not just some definition that someone's chosen to put down, is the excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy, optimistic state across all situations. Then it continues saying that the process of toxic positivity results in the denial, minimization and invalidation of the authentic human experience. Now this probably sounds familiar, as I'm sure we've all come across similar things online saying good vibes only, or I don't have room for negativity, etc. However, we need to be aware that none of this is natural, because naturally as humans we do have a wide range of emotions, and therefore it's not that surprising that we're going to feel negative emotions quite often. So in this way, aiming and trying to avoid feeling and expressing a whole sort of range of our emotions is just not natural at all. Also, I'd like to add that I think that toxic positivity can be about the dismissal of negative emotions as well, because as well as just sort of saying, no, I'm fine, it can be feeling bad about yourself or feeling bad about something and then saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter because people have it worse or whatever, which may seem like a good thing, but it's not really good at all. For a start, when we're pretending that everything is good when it simply isn't, is pretty fake. We all know that, and this can never be a good thing. Often, for example, just as an example, often when someone's friends with someone who does seem to foster like too much of this kind of toxic positivity trait, then it can lead to them feeling as if they cannot be as open around that friend, so they end up just pretending to be happy or pretending that they're fine when actually that's just really superficial. Now this can weaken the relationship on both sides, because when you think about it, neither the person who is sort of toxically positive, let's say, or the person who's with them are being honest about the way they're feeling, and it's just not good at all. But what does this look like on a larger scale? Well, I feel in general many people feel a bit reluctant to be as open about the difficulties they're facing in life, as they're worried about being judged, and that they feel that it is bad for them to be openly expressing negative emotions when there are many people who they think have it much worse. This makes it harder for people to be as honest about it and about themselves in real life. But now let's bring social media into it, because it seems as if social media provides the perfect environment for toxic positivity to really thrive. Because basically when we scroll through it, so whether that's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Pinterest or whatever, it seems as if people are just literally trying to showcase their lives, saying how great they are, how great everything's going, just kind of presenting it rather than just showing it for how it is. And for example, our feed's normally just filled with pictures of things like parties, holidays and let's say festivals, meaning it is while there's hardly anybody taking photos of something more simplistic. And I've noticed even throughout COVID, when people aren't going to be going to parties, people aren't going to be likely to be having much of a good time, there are still very few people sort of being super honest on social media, and instead they'll just post something, when they feel their best, or just post a very tiny snippet of the whole picture. So for instance, they'll post barbecue last summer, or they'll post a picture of themselves when they've literally just tidied up the house, or just something when they're feeling really good. But of course that's not the reality at all. Now I think part of this is of course going to be relevant to the aesthetic of social media, and I suppose no one is going to ever be too interested in a picture of someone's dinner, which is why people are kind of reluctant to post things just going on in their normal day-to-day life, and I don't really blame them for that. Although saying that, just as a little side note, I think that there's a lot of kind of older people, and I think in the past a lot of people did post more sort of uninteresting things online. But I think that's more of a habit with sort of the older generation, and it's kind of faded out a bit now, which just shows how kind of toxic social media can be for us in regards to having to put out that our life is amazing or whatever on there. Another thing which probably isn't mentioned as often is that people sort of worry about what they post on social media, because they're just, if they post anything more negative, because they think that they'll just be accused of being attention seekers, or they'll think that people don't necessarily want to see something bad, because they'll think, people feel bad enough anyway, so they don't want to sort of make it worse. When actually I just feel that it's better to be more authentic and more honest, because then it removes kind of the negative feelings sort of trapped inside, and it's just being more genuine really. But that's just not the case now on social media. Another thing that's relevant, which I think is worth a mention, which might seem slightly different from this whole topic, but it's the fact that there's so many of these self-development tools now, from books, podcasts and even quotes. Now I'm going to be honest and admit that I've never read any of these self-development books, and I don't really sort of intend to, but at least from what I've heard, they're normally filled with seemingly helpful advice, suggesting that by being more productive, for instance, we can easily just turn our lives around. But is this really the case? As an example, I was watching a YouTube video, which I will try and link in my description, but basically the guy, this is quite a it was a really popular video, a lot of people had viewed it, and quite a big YouTuber, but he was basically saying that when he was sort of, I don't know, a young adult, he was reading a lot of these sort of self-development books, and he was thinking that they were making him better because he was being more sort of productive and doing sort of more exercise and stuff, when in reality he just didn't, internally he just wasn't really getting anywhere, and he did sort of realise that. Now, part of the reason for why these self-development tools aren't necessarily going to be the best, even though they kind of say, well, you need to be positive and whatever, is because at the end of the day, the people who make them are looking to make money, and of course that's completely understandable because everyone needs to make money. And I'm not sort of dismissing sort of self-development culture. I think that to some extent it can be somewhat helpful, but it's not sort of something that people should kind of feed into too much. And I think as well, if anyone wants to look at self-development stuff, I think they should just think that people who do create them are doing it to profit as well, therefore the methods and whatever aren't necessarily going to be as brilliant as what might have been promised. Another thing with these self-development quotes, or let's just say positive quotes, I can't help noticing that they're just so oversimplified, and that can kind of foster into this belief that just being positive and being happy can be really easy when it isn't. So just as an example, there's the classic quote of positive thoughts only, beautiful things happen when you distance yourself from negativity, or no matter what's happening, choose to be happy. So of course these can be interpreted in different ways, but it seems to me as if these quotes are implying that if we simply shift away from negativity and ignore any of the more negative feelings inside ourselves, it will enable us to be more successful and to feel a lot better. Yet in reality, we're just going to be burying ourselves under more problems until it gets to the point where it's just extremely overwhelming. Furthermore, in case this isn't like super obvious, it's actually really unhealthy, I mean in regards to toxic positivity. Basically, because mentally, when we're ignoring sort of negative emotions rather than trying to deal with them ourselves or to address them, or more importantly of all, I think, talking to somebody else about them, then we're basically just letting them build up inside of us, and that's just going to be disruptive. So an article written by Psychiatry Today, once again, I love using their websites when researching topics which are kind of relate to psychiatry, I don't really know much about. But it was basically saying that it's basically providing a more sort of scientific and in-depth explanation to this. But basically, when we do understand that we're dealing with certain difficulties, this becomes something known as emotional acceptance. And this makes sense because basically if we can accept what we're going through, it can kind of help us progress in the future, and it can help us feel better. But if we're sort of not accepting what we're feeling, not accepting what we're going through, then it's just not good. So I kind of repeated myself a bit here, but hope you kind of get the point, but I'll link that again. Now from this, wouldn't it be so much better if people just weren't afraid to be as open to others about how they're feeling, so that these emotions just don't bottle up so much? Now of course it would. However, as it stands, for many people, this is actually extremely difficult, and probably for you watching this as well. Especially when people are not necessarily going to understand what you're going through, and instead they'll try and provide some annoyingly positive and a rather poor attempt to basically cheer you up. Now this might be a quote, it might be advice or whatever, but at the same time most of us, including me, would lie if we haven't sort of engaged in this tiresome positive self-talk. Now this can look like trying to offer people advice, or trying to say things like, oh well, there's people in a worse situation to you. So what can we actually say instead? So I'm not really scratching the surfaces here because there's loads of things, but hopefully from this you'll kind of understand roughly what to say a bit more. But rather than saying I'll just look on the bright side, it's better to say something like I can understand what you're going through is difficult right now. Or rather than saying just smile more, say it is okay to feel down at the moment. Because while we may feel as if we're being less helpful by sort of not offering kind of rigid, helpful advice, often people who are going through a hard time, they don't necessarily want that, and they'd rather just know that someone's there for them, so they can kind of have some sort of consolidation. But from all the talk about toxic positivity, surely it wouldn't be brilliant either if we all just switched to being toxically negative instead. Now, there's no definition of toxic negativity, this is just me kind of making it up. But just for instance, though, imagine going to visit a group of people and feeling like you can't say anything positive as you feel they might just dismiss the positive feeling that you're expressing. Because sometimes it can seem as there are people like that, and it can be really annoying, and let's face it, no one wants to spend time with them. Well, actually, to be fair, some people do, but it's just not always best for everyone to be surrounded by negative people all the time, and that's possibly where kind of toxic positivity sort of stems from. But anyway, I'll get off my tangent, but meanwhile, we are in difficult times. Everyone knows we're in difficult times, and while it is of course important for us to address what we're going through and address how we feel, I think many would agree, that it's important to have some sort of positive things going on in our lives, to be able to think about things in a more positive way, etc. Now, this doesn't have to be anything big, but it can be something as simple as going for a walk, or just reading, or just watching a TV show that you enjoy. Because without giving any sort of consideration to the positive things and trying to dismiss any kind of positive occurrence or thought isn't going to be good for us either. Meanwhile, trying to think of positive things and incorporate things you enjoy more into our daily lives, though, it's not sort of toxic positivity at all. That is just sort of normal positivity, and I think a certain element of positivity is really important. But when it gets to the point that you're just dismissing negative feelings, it's just not good. Therefore, from this, I think it's just important to be aware that having a balance is super important. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's been pretty brief, but I'm aiming to sort of make my videos a bit longer in the future. And also, I know it's a bit waffly, but that's me. I'm kind of new to the sort of YouTube thing. I don't really know if I'm going to carry this on, but I've linked my sources into the description, so if you'd like to learn anything more about toxic positivity, or if you'd rather have a more sort of in-depth description of it, then please just look at my description. Also, I'm a blogger. I've been doing this for a while. I've linked that into my description as well, and some of my more recent posts, including one about toxic positivity. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.